You know, when it comes to the Gang of Eight's amnesty bill, our federal politicians either haven't taken the time to actually read it, or they have and they simply don't care what's in it. If you do read the bill, like my staff and I have personally, then you will find it's filled with all kinds of loopholes written into various sections throughout the bill. And I'm not making it up or being paranoid here. These loopholes are there, and they aren't tucked into some obscure part of the bill or in some footnote at the bottom of a page. They're actually written in plain sight. It's very clear that the Gang of Eight bill gives illegal immigrant criminals a free pass and allows them to qualify for registered provisional immigrant status. Now listen, here. For all you liberals and progressives watching that don't believe me, just do me a simple favor. Do yourself a favor. Use Google. Read up on Section 2101 and 3701 of the bill and see for yourself. I mean, that's what we do here. I'm not making this up. This isn't from a blog posting. We here at The Blaze want you to see the truth. I want you to read it for yourself. Now, the other dangerous element of the Gang of Eight's bill is the interpretation power it gives to the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security when it comes to enforcing the laws that it sets up. I mean, if Congress signs off on this, it will take power and accountability away from Congress, how convenient, and put it in the hands of bureaucrats and political appointees over the DHS. All the Gang of Eight bill is doing is creating an outline for other government departments to basically decide when they want to fill in the blanks and interpret the law whichever way they like. This is going to be dangerous, especially when President Obama gets to appoint the next Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. And by the way, Sheila Jackson Lee was suggested. And that person will pick and choose which policies to enforce. Here to talk about all of this is Jordan Sekulow, Executive Director of the American Center for Law and Justice. All right, Jordan, people think it's paranoid when you talk about the loophole language in bills like the Gang of Eight bill, but clearly Section 2101 defines what a dreamer is based on their status as somebody who's completed an education or has or is seeking gainful employment. But then right there at the end of the section, it says the secretary can waive both those provisions. So the dreamer is just anybody that the secretary thinks is dreaming or something.
And this is why it's important. Rather than having the registered provisional immigration status, which is the main part of this law, being able to qualify for the dreamer provision actually gives you a green card. And getting a green card is a step up from RPI, which is this new status that would be created by the law. And if it was passed and actually by the House and signed by the president. And so the idea that first you're in RPI, but then if you met the DREAM Act proposed requirements, or the one that's been an executive order by the president, then the Department of Homeland Security can actually get you right into that status. Now, a green card is the step before becoming a full U.S. citizen. You can travel, you can move around freely, very difficult to be revoked. Again, this is another way the federal government can leapfrog what is sometimes years. And, there's what's not in here, Andrew, is most people that are getting green cards in the United States, it's a family issue or, for the most part, education. So they're bringing a skill or a talent or a knowledge that we want in. So we need for research or technology, so they get green cards. And that's who is supposed to get them. But here, as long as you can, if they want to, they can then take you in from RPI status into green card status, which, again, this actually makes the DREAM Act legal and gives the executive branch more power to get to determine who will qualify and who doesn't.
All right, now Section 3701 is one of my favorite sections. That's the criminal penalties that would prevent somebody from getting RPI status. There's membership in gang activities, there's drunk driving, there's misdemeanors, there's child molestation and rape. The only provision that's not given a waiver is child molestation. The way out of your... This was my favorite part, I'm sorry, in the section. You can just renounce your membership in the gang. You renounce your membership in the gang, and that's pretty much it. You can get a free pass for 3 drunk driving convictions, 3 misdemeanor assault and battery convictions, and in the case of rape, if it's knocked down to misdemeanor assault, Look at these guys with the gang rape in Austin, Texas. I mean, they could be charged with sex offense against a minor, but if it gets knocked down, they might find themselves with a free pass.
Well, and the idea here, too, is that you had to be convicted to even qualify for what would have to be waived here, to renounce your membership. You had to be convicted not just of a crime, but of a crime where one of the elements was being part of gang activity, knowing that it was gang activity, and doing so that you would, for standing or so that you would rise up and get a better position within the gang. So to even meet being a gang member for purposes of this to exclude you before you need the waiver, Andrew, you've got to meet these three criteria for what constitutes a gang member by this law. And so you've got to get, again, convicted of being of a crime where one of the elements of committing the crime is being in a gang. Then you have to have known, you had to know that the person convicted, that you were in a gang and that you were furthering gang activity.
And it's not like you could just deny any of that stuff, right? I mean, it's not like you could just deny any of that.
And then, even if you've done all that, you can just renounce it.
Now let's talk about
after that. I mean, that's after the conviction. So you've already been a convicted a criminal at that point, a gang member, and now they're saying, well, if they'll renounce it and you meet the other parts, not this part, but the other parts, we can give you the status if we want.
All right, let's talk about the Department of Homeland Security and other agencies. Again, 2101, other parts of the bill, there are so many wide provisions of discretionary authority for the Secretary of Homeland Security and other agencies. I mean, pretty much it's going to be define as you will.
That's right. I mean, 2101, it gives basically waivers to almost everything, but then when you go to 3107, you see there are some things, there's a couple of crime provisions, but it's very complicated. We talked about it here once before, even on misdemeanors, it has to be 3 misdemeanors on 3 separate days, not related to each other. The idea here, again, that they have done as much as they can to not even have to give waivers. They've included as many people, but then it will be totally up to, not Congress, but an appointee by the president to decide which gang member has renounced and which hasn't, and who gets in and who doesn't under this. And then, by the way, if they were here, before they were 16, then they'd qualify for the Section 2103 DREAM Act. So you could have done all of that gang activity, but been here young enough, gotten the waivers, and then now get jumped from having RPI status to the green card. And this is not predictable for anybody. It's not predictable for immigrants. It's not predictable for the people we'd want in, the people we want out, or for the government officials, the ICE officials, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. I mean, you've got here conflicts throughout this law, and based on who the president is, they're going to nominate someone for this position who's going to share mostly their beliefs, who could find themselves, which is typical of the federal bureaucracy right now, finding it very tough to change things because the bureaucrats have got their way of doing things, and they will undermine conservatives in the federal bureaucracy.
Now
and they're known to do so.
What about the legal precedent here? I mean, you have created this really gaping hole in our immigration system. You've given all this discretionary authority. I don't even know if local judges and local law enforcement, if any of these people commit any of the crimes they committed before, are going to even know who they're dealing with. I don't know that part of it. But it seems like this is a mess for the next administration, or at least the next Congress.
It's very similar to the healthcare law because of the size and scope. Most of these 1,000-page laws or multi-thousand pages, I mean, they are just setting up a scheme so that agencies within the government can set up the rules. The rules aren't really in the law. That's set up by unelected bureaucrats, most of which are long-term, lifetime bureaucrats who get directed by the first people with the bite at the apple. That will be the Obama team here. They will be the people in charge of the bureaucrats for the next couple of years. So that will be that they'll set the tone for, just like the healthcare law with those rules and regulations that have been coming out that are controversial. This will happen here. And it brings up another point. E-Verify, some of the provisions to secure us and secure the border here are exactly like the employer mandate, which the administration just said isn't ready, so we're not going to enforce that now. What would stop them from taking the exact same reasoning or logic and say, you know what, E-Verify, like they've argued in court, by the way, and they tried to stop states from using it like Arizona, E-Verify is just not ready yet, so we're going to delay that, but we'll keep the other parts of the enforcement. That's a huge problem here. It gives so much discretion to an administration in the now and in the future that they get to decide what parts of the law are going to affect and what parts of the law don't go into effect, who to give waivers to. Very broadly, they have that power. And on top of that, on top of that, I just want to make it clear, they could pass all of this and then put a halt to a lot of the security measures.
Well, that
but
I mean,
yet keep it going.
We know that.
We're seeing that. That's huge.
We know border security is not coming with this bill. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Thanks for the insight.
Thanks, Andrew.